Hi, and welcome to Magic Numbers. This is episode number 166. After a brief hiatus, I'm back with the numbers and with the data. And today we're going to be talking about signals in Pick2 Draft. And obviously, as always, thanks to my patrons, you are the sponsor of that show. So thank you very much for supporting me through that. And a special shout out to Neil Gikas, Joan, and Jason, who are the new patrons that joined in the time since the last recording. So thank you very much for that. And of course, thank to all the continuing patrons that are still there. It definitely helps me to keep motivated to release those episodes. What didn't help me to keep releasing those episodes was the general mood around the Spider-Man set. And as always, I'm going to start with a preamble, and it's a double preamble this time even. And first of all, is when you have nothing too useful to say, stay silent. And this was the reason why I didn't record anything in the last, 3-4 weeks. I just did not have anything to say. No one was interested in the Spider-Man content, or at least few people were interested in that. Most content creators took into doing some episodes about, top 10 sets or going back to reviews of old sets and that kind of stuff. I just did not have anything to talk about that was useful. I tried to do some analysis of older data, but I didn't find anything particularly interesting. And I just decided, you know what? I didn't have holiday this year at all. And for me to take a holiday, obviously, optimally, it would be to have a holiday from my day work and from my content creation. I couldn't take holiday from my day work, but at least I could take a short holiday from content creation. And I used that opportunity because you can imagine having a relatively challenging day job, lecturers, they don't have regulated hours. I'm getting emails from students at any time of day and night, and I try to answer them as quickly as I physically can. Humble brag, I've been nominated for the Teacher of the Year at my university, so I'm doing something right, hopefully, at least in the politics department with the students. But it does take a strain on you. And on top of that, doing content, and not just content, because I can guest any podcast if I'm invited with minor prep, go in there, wing it, and be done with it in 2 hours and move on with my life. It's fine. But my seminars, they do require preparation. It is, like between 4 and 16 hours of preparation, depending on how challenging the analysis is. And this accrues over if you do it week for week, it accrues over time to do quite a lot. I mean, I know when I started doing the podcast because I can look at my 17 data and 17 lens data, and I can actually see how many drafts I played before I started podcasting and how many drafts I play after. And it's a lot of drafts that I stopped doing, basically. Thank you, Dungaremga. I will come to that topic in a second. They were just telling me that it was cool to see me on the coverage at the Spotlight series. And indeed, on coverage, I was. I might even put the link to my match time-stamped in the description of the podcast. It was fun to play it as well. I didn't have that feeling for a long time. But okay. First, let's clear up the Spider-Man / Omen Path situation. I was not happy releasing any content with basic data. I didn't think it was worth making it. I could have done like which cards belong in which deck, but honestly, there were just 2-3 decks that were draftable in that format. I'm not saying that the format was bad, because I actually played a large chunk of drafts in that format and I enjoyed them. They were like fun, and they didn't require much. It was not, definitely not an all-timer, not a banger even, not an above average set, but it was a passable set that you could draft a couple of times. I did 25 drafts, but it was slightly less interesting, especially with red not being really a color. It was problematic. So I'd rather sit that part out, and I could dedicate this time to make something on the newer side. And that's exactly what I did. I started thinking, what are the opportunities with the data from Spider-Man? And I came up that actually Pick2 Draft is interesting to analyze from the perspective of signals in the draft. because it's different, and the signals should be much stronger and much easier to read in a pick to draft. So hopefully you can get better data on how the signals impact what's going on. So I did that. I worked on that the last 2 weeks at the leisurely pace, and then I was procrastinating releasing it because I was practicing for the Liverpool spotlight because I wanted to do well, and well I did. So we can move to the second part of the preamble, and it was so amazing to be back to playing on the GP circuit. I mean, not many of you maybe know, but in my before times, like late and early 2000s to mid 2000s, I played quite a lot of competitive Magic. I've been to the Pro Tour. I've cashed multiple GPs. I made multiple day twos. And then, of course, I retired and did nothing. And then I came back just playing limited because I always liked limited, to be fair. And I always preferred to play limited. I just couldn't afford it at that time. Arena brought me back. I started playing limited. And then, of course, I got dragged into the whole content creation and data analysis angle of that. But I always had that competitive itch. I mean, those of you in the chat who play with me in the FNM, like Graham, know that I'm not the kind of a person that will give games away when I play against someone in the FNM. I treat every game quite seriously if it's on a competitive scene, and I can play for fun. That's a very different thing. But if I play, especially in paper, I'm quite serious in trying to win the games. So I have the competitive urge. That's definitely always been the case with me. And it was good to go back. And, I used all the tools that I have access to through my very being cunning. Like, for example, I am helping, as you may have seen from one of the episodes I released, I'm helping sometimes Team Cosmos in their preparations for Limited. And since I helped them, I thought, well, they might as well help me. So I worked with them, trying to build my list for the Liverpool tournament, tried to tune my VV deck, get good sideboard plans, leaning on the expertise of people who are at the absolute pinnacle of the sport in terms of competitive constructed. And here there are some pictures from Liverpool that I'm sharing on the screen when I was interviewed after winning my feature match. This picture in the middle, it's actually made by Frank Karsten, which is amazing for me because, of course, Frank Karsten is the father of the data analysis in Magic the Gathering. We had a lovely chat. And, I'm not saying that it's going to happen soon, but we've chatted about a potential appearance of him on Magic Numbers, which would be definitely my dream. I know that we need to synchronize the calendars and it won't happen instantly, but it's almost guaranteed that it's going to happen at some stage. So that would be great. Here we have someone who has been on this podcast already, Jean-Emmanuel Deprat. And I've interacted with Jean-Emmanuel a lot. I invited him to the podcast. He very often rates the Twitch stream when I'm recording. So we might actually, maybe today he's not playing because he's regenerating after the spotlight. But normally he's streaming on Monday, and that's why sometimes he rates me. But I never met him in person. And in Liverpool, I met him in person. And he's just such a lovely person. It's exactly what you would expect him to be from his streaming persona. But sometimes, the streaming persona and the actual person is very different. He was an absolutely adorable person. I hang out with him quite a lot. In fact, we were just sitting and chatting after round 14, just complaining, thinking about what is the future of Standard and stuff like that. And at a certain moment, they announced that the round is up. And we both scroll through our player management thingy on the Melee, and we just look at the pairing. We look at each other. We look at the pairing again, and just oh, I guess we have to move 10 tables down because we got paired into each other, and then we played the last round, where he beat me, and in pretty close games. I was actually quite content with that. One game, it was a race. And had I had one interaction spell, I would have won. I tried to do something very cunning. I basically knew that I'm then on board next turn. So I played my multiversal passage. I used the shock ability to play it untapped and kept it on blue in the vain hope that I might scare him off. And, for some lesser player, maybe it would have worked. They would be afraid that I have the Into the Flood Maw. But Jean-Emmanuel said, well, I knew that if I don't attack, you're going to win next turn yourself. So I had to go for it, and he went for it. And obviously my bluff didn't work completely, and he managed to kill me from that. And second game, I unfortunately had to mulligan to 4. And that game, I didn't draw any action after that, unfortunately, and it ended pretty miserably. Now, Jean Emmanuel agreed with me that I can tell this story as I mulliganed to 4, and I don't have to mention that he mulliganed to 5. Okay, so you don't have to know that he mulliganed to 5. Yeah, that's fine. We agreed on that. It was a gentleman's agreement. But in the end, I went 9-6 and a very competitive limited GP. I was 7-0 up. I played on the stream. I won that game on the stream. I think playing not terribly even. And at the same time, okay, I did tank for like half an hour to try to figure out how to protect my delirium from active Key Knight Curator. But in the end, I got there and I managed to win that game. And I had a lovely interview with Martin Juza. I get to meet a bunch of players that I interacted online with and chat with them. I talked with some people who listen to my show. I made some new friends, especially if I would have to recommend someone. Jacopo Di Napoli, one of the Italian players, he beat me in round 9 of the tournament and then later went on to top 8 the tournament. An absolutely adorable person as well. So shout out to him. And I hang out with my mates who I drove with. We drove for 11 hours because of the traffic jams. And I think for roughly 9 of those 11 hours, me and my friend were singing songs, mainly released before 1996. I think that was our cutoff. And the other friend was poorly sitting in the back, and I had to listen to that slaughtering renditions that we were making. But in the end, we got there, we had fun, and I highly recommend you going to larger events if they are somewhere within your range. Because it's, even if you don't play the main event, those things are just fun. You meet people, you interact, you experience, especially like in Europe when you have a mixture of the French, the Polish, the Italians, the Czechs, the Croatians. There was like a whole contingency of Croatians that were also fun to chat with. It's just I missed it so much, honestly, and now I feel the urge of going again, obviously, but I can't do it too often, so I will definitely not go to Lille. Okay, that was a very bloody long preamble, but I'm still excited for that trip. It was a lot of fun. Listening to Simon Nielsen on the stream, giving factoids about my life that he must have dug up in some deep depths of MTG ELO. That was impressive and fun. Also, I don't know if you know, but if you sit on the feature match and those headphones, they play white noise. It doesn't work on Simon Nielsen's voice. He's got such a loud and melodic voice that it just breaks through the white noise that is supposed to cover the information from us. So it's not perfect in that aspect. They should maybe regulate down Simon a bit, if that's possible even. All right. Fun and games over. Let's move to the actual serious topic of this conversation. And, I understand that lots of you probably are not that thrilled about Omen Paths as a set, but this episode is not really about Omen Paths. We will be talking about some... No, I don't think... I think I made it card agnostic, and that was part of the design of that episode. I don't want to focus on the Omen Path cards because people don't like them for multiple reasons. I want to focus on how does picking 2 cards impact the signals that drafters are sending. And we're going to have another pick 2 format coming up soon, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and I never thought I was going to say that, but I just did. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles set is going to be pick 2, and that set is allegedly designed to be a pick 2. Well, this one was sort of improvised to be a pick 2. I think that pick 2 as a drafting strategy was the strongest part of the set. And I think it is a technology that has a lot of potential, because I think that with the size of Standard right now, it's actually not a bad idea to make a smaller set once in a while. If they are making 6 sets a year, I'd rather them do 2 of them being small sets, just to reduce the card pool. and maybe reduce the prices of standard decks as well at the same time. And I think that for guild sets, pick 2 4 people drafting in the pod situation is actually quite a good thing, because you will not have, by definition, multiple people competing for the same guilds. And I think that is a net benefit for those kind of guild sets. Now, I don't think that it should be done for every set, and it should be more of a novelty than a normality. But one, maybe at a push, 2 sets a year could be pick 2 sets just to reduce the card pool that we have to deal with in Constructed. And I think that's not a terrible thing. But because it's done as a part of the series about signals, I have a bit of like a refresher on what I talked about signals before in the previous sets. So first of all, the notion that signals exist is universally acknowledged. People know that there are signals in draft, but it's more of an art than a science. So we don't actually know how to interpret those signals. And when I was younger, there was a lot of creationists in the Polish internet, and obviously, I'm the kind of a person that will debate anyone on anything if I think I'm in the right. And since I was an evolutionary biologist, I was quite happily taking on creationists in the internet. And one example that they were always using is that DNA is information, and every information has to have an intelligent creator. And this argument, it sounds sort of reasonable at first glance, as usually those kind of arguments look for reasonable at first glance when you don't really think about it. But in fact, it's complete rubbish. I mean, information does not need any sort of intelligent creator. And as a counter argument, I was saying that if there was a Native American tracker and a herd of bison would pass through a prairie a week before, the tracker would be able to look at the signs, interpret the information that the herd of bison left, and tell us that a herd of bison passed through that creek a week before. And it's hard to argue that the herd of bison is an intelligent creator, which means that information does not need an intelligent designer. But at the same time, if I would be looking at that prairie, I would not be able to tell you that the herd of bison passed there a week ago with that kind of specificity, because I'm not a tracker. I'm not specializing in interpreting certain signs. And it's very much the same in draft. Some people are just better in reading those signals and figuring out what's going on in the draft. Some people are worse. But there are other confounding factors on top of that. So also, how do we know that we read the information? No one is going back to the draft and looking at what every seat picked and then analyzing that, oh, I read that information correctly. I figured that out. We always base our assumption on reading the information correct on the fact that, and I got a busted deck and therefore I won. And that's why I know that I can read the signals. But in fact, we don't know if that's the signals or maybe some other things that are happening there. And there can be other things that are happening there. For example, maybe you're not reading the signals. Maybe you're just sitting in a poor pod where people are passing you good cards. There's no signals passing around about which colors are open. There's just good cards floating around because people are not picking good cards. And it's not a signal that the color is open. It's a signal that the draft pod is consisting of players who don't value good cards very highly, and you're getting good cards. And maybe by chance, a couple of those good cards were in the same color, and then you just went on that color, and then you got more good cards because the pod was weak, and that's it. But is it really a signal in a draft? Not necessarily. So we don't know exactly what is the impact of the signals and how to read them. And ages ago, I made an episode on looking at signals in normal draft, in an 8-person pod. But before that, maybe we can go to the definition of the signal. That's, I think, very important. And I took 2 definitions. One is from information theory, and that's function that conveys information about a phenomenon. That's a very vague definition, in my opinion. The other one I found from it's a biological definition of signal, and that's actions done by an organism to alert other organisms. And I think that this definition is just such a very good definition for our purposes, because we are picking things in a draft, and actually we actively want to send the signal to our neighbors. We want to send the signal, look, this, I'm not taking this. This, I'm interested in it. The issue is that we can send the signal, I'm not interested in something, by passing good cards. It's much harder to send the signal, oh, I'm interested in this, by taking something away, because the fact that it's not there, the person reading the signal must interpret it in such a way. So they must figure out, ooh, there is no black in those packs. Therefore, probably the person next to me is picking black. I probably should not be competing with that, because they are sitting in front of me, so they will be picking all the good black cards before me in two of the packs, and I will be able to pick good black cards only in one of those packs. So I'm sort of behind on that arms race. But of course, we will have to somehow hope that our opponent gets that information. And it doesn't happen very often. And an anecdote I'm always showing is Simon Nielsen was feeding Nathan Stoyer in a draft in the World Championships. And he did this amazing episodes, Draft Punks. I don't know if you know the YouTube channel, but they have some really good limited content. But for a while, they had Simon Nielsen coming and analyzing proto drafts with them. And they were very good episodes, because Simon has a very acute analytical brain and is able to explain something. And it so happened once that it was his draft that they were analyzing, and Nathan Stoyer's at the same time. And Simon said, oh, I passed this great card to Nathan so that he gets it, that I'm leaving that one open. And then he just didn't read that signal at all. And you can see that Nathan Stoyer, who is a great player, it completely ignores that strong signal and does a thing that is conflicting with Simon in the end. And if Nathan Stoyer cannot read a signal that is being sent to him, the odds of an average arena drafter reading that signal is even lower. Therefore, it's really hard to send signals and hope that they are going to be read. It's almost impossible. So one thing that I can tell you based on that anecdotal evidence is that sending signals is not something that we should worry too much about. But reading signals is different, because there you are in control of what's going on. And not in every draft it will work, because in some drafts it's chaotic and people change their lanes 50 times. But in some drafts where people settle into their lane relatively quickly, you are going to get relatively strong signals and you'll be able to read them. So draft signal, it's a mix of things that you send as a piece of information, both willingly and unwillingly. And this is important to know. For example, you open a busted black rare in the pack. Let's say it is Elegy Acolyte, and we go back to Edge of Eternities, because people loved Edge of Eternities. And in the same pack, you have Dubious Delicacy. Now, you're not very willingly sending that Dubious Delicacy on a trip, because someone next to you might think, oh, Dubious Delicacy is there. Black is open. I'm moving in. And your Elegy Acolyte looks bad. Now, you should not stop picking Elegy Acolyte because you're afraid of sending a black signal, because it's still a very strong card and you should obviously pick it. But unwillingly, you have to send the black signal. But as I said about the bisons and the tracker and me looking at this creek on the prairie and figuring out whether the bison was there, reading of that signal is going to be based on intuition and perception of the recipient. And because of that, there is plenty of ambiguity. Also, signals, because we tend to think of signals like, oh, this card is a signal. But lack of cards can also be a signal, especially in the sets where we know that there are colored cards of all 5 colors in the pack. Knowing that one color is missing, it gives us information that someone upstream is picking cards of that color. And I think that the important thing about the draft signal in general is that it has a range, it has some strength, and it has some specificity. And I'm going to maybe talk a bit more about what those means in a second. And all this comes from my older episodes. If you will try to look at the back catalog of Magic Numbers, you can find episodes about signals, and you will have much more detailed versions of those presentations, specifically based on the other sets. So here we had, I made those kind of, this was based on Lord of the Rings. That's how long ago it was. But here we have some parameters of a signal. So first of all, if we are on pick 1, pick 2, this signal will be limited to one player. So range is going to be small of that signal because only one player is covered for now. We know what that player picks up. And okay, here we have a card called King of the Oathbreakers. And I did some data on that card in that set. And I knew that over all the drafts that we had in the data set at that time for Lord of the Rings, that card was opened in your pack. So it was seen in pick 1, pack 1, roughly 140 times. And it was seen in pack 1, pick 2, 41 times, which means that, let me calculate quickly, 2/7 of the King of the Oathbreakers, because we can assume that if there was 140 of them opened by us in pack 1, there was also 140 opened in by our opponent to the left, right, left. And we only see 41 of them being passed, which means that 100 are gone. So like 5/7 of the King of the Oathbreakers are gone. So if you get past a pack and you see King of the Oathbreakers, that's actually quite a strong signal, because only 2/7 of the King of the Oathbreakers get passed, and 5/7 of them get picked as a first pick by your opponent. On the other hand, when we have a card like Saruman the White, which was roughly opened 400 times, 350 were passed, which means that only like 10% of them disappear in pick 1, which means that seeing Saruman the White in pick 2 is not really a signal of any sort. 90% of them should be still there. So how can we evaluate it? If we see Saruman the White as pick 2, roughly half of them is gone, or as pick 3 or as pick 4, when more than a third of it is gone. Now, this is starting to become a stronger signal, because 66% of them should be already gone, and we still see one, so maybe White is open or something like that. But in pick 2, we will only know these kind of numbers. So we know that King of the Oathbreakers would be a relatively strong signal to see, because it's something that doesn't happen every time, while Saruman the White is going to be a relatively common occurrence. So the pick 1, pack 2 can give you some pretty strong information, but it only tells you something about one of the players. And in most cards, it doesn't tell you much, because most cards should still be there. Only like if you see a super busted rare of some sorts in pick 1, pack 2, it would tell you something about the draft, because well, if that rare is still there, it means that something else was being picked, and then you have to start thinking, what could it have been? And probably the most telling information on pick 1, pack 2 is which rarity is missing from the pack, which is super hard right now with the play boosters. It was much easier in those days. So honestly, right now, pick 1, pack 2 does not tell you much, because you can see a strong rare, but it doesn't mean that there was not a second strong rare in the same pack, which is problematic. So if we go further and we see like a pick 1, pack 6, we see Saruman the White here, same Saruman the White. There was 390 of them, and by pick 6, there should be around 60 of them, which means that this is a strong signal. Like around 1/6 of the Sarumans are only present at pick 6. So if you see the Saruman pick 1, pack 6, this is a strong signal that no one was interested in that card. And the range of that signal is larger, because we have 5 people that have passed that Saruman to you. But if we have a card like Improvised Club from that same set, around half of that is still in the pack. So it's a 50-50 chance that we see it on that pack if it was open in the previous one, which means that it's probably not a super important information. It's not like going to tell you much about, oh, red is wide open because I see this card that I see 50% of the time getting past to that stage. That's not really like going to be a strong signal. So it can yield a strong information, but you have to be careful not to overinterpret it. And the important thing, I think, to understand during that is that information you're getting is much stronger for the people closer to you than from the people far away from you. And we're going to come back to that later, because it will rarely tell you anything useful about the further seats. Because this player opened the pack, they might have opened a busted rare. Obviously, they're not interested in Saruman the White over a busted rare, but you can't blame them. Just busted rare is very good. But this player saw Saruman in the context of maybe like one other uncommon and then a bunch of commons because rare was already gone. So it tells you more about this player than about this player. And of course, it tells you most about this player. This player was not interested in Saruman the White. Okay. And then we go to pack one, pick 9. And here we have the full range of the draft. So we see information about all the 8 players. And at pick 9, the Saruman is almost gone. So there's like, if you see one still, if it wheeled, that's a very rare occurrence. Like literally no one is interested in white in this spot. And if you see the Improvised Club, you still see roughly a quarter of them in the pack. So it's some sort of information. It also means that this card wheels quarter of the time. So if you open the card, a pack, and there was a good red card that you could pick on par with some blue card, and you had this Improvised Club that you might be interested in playing, well, in that kind of situation, you might pick the red card, and you know that you have 25% chance of wheeling that Improvised Club. And again, card examples here are irrelevant. Just treat them as card A, card B. It doesn't really matter. But the pack 1, pick 9 gives you even stronger info. And in some cases, it will actually tell you if the color is open to one side. But again, you have the same thing as I told you last time. The information is much stronger about those players than about those players. And I think that this is something that a lot of players are talking like, oh, I was picking all the blue from this side, so these players should be passing blue to me. But at the same time, we don't know much about those players because maybe they just opened enough blue in the early packs to navigate themselves into it. And most of the strength of the signal comes from those players. So maybe actually there is a higher chance that your neighbor that you're passing to is picking the color that you are picking, completely ignoring the signals you're sending because people just ignore those signals. So, okay, and I think that the important part reading the wheel is avoid concluding from cards that are rarely picked on first 4 picks because it would just not tell you enough. But pack 1, pick 9 is the first pick where we get absence information. Which cards are not in the pack is going to tell us a lot. And also, it's the first pack where we actually know how it looked like because we opened it. So I think that pack 1, pick 9 is a very important pick in terms of like signal reading because that's the one that gives you a whole different level of information, including you knew all the cards that were opened and you know what's been taken from them. So if you remember, I don't think that it's advisable to try to memorize the whole pack. But if you're playing on Arena, you can always, use some kind of a tool that tells you what was in that pack to remind yourself and look at that if you want to practice signal readings. And if you don't do that, then my advice is to memorize the important cards. Like I always pick like 3 cards that I want to wheel from that pack. And then I see which ones of those wheeled. If none of them, I'm in danger. If all of them, that's pretty good because I'm probably in the weak pot and I'm going to get good cards. But you don't have to remember every single card that was passed, so don't worry about it. Okay. And this is what I came in that first episode about signals, is that how to measure the signals. And I sort of divided cards into three broader categories, and they roughly check out. There will be some cards that stay in the pack for long and then only start disappearing at the end of the pack. These are bad cards. No one wants to pick them early, so there's the erosion of their numbers is very low. And then late they start picking it because they don't have a choice. Then there are good cards. These disappear very rapidly from the packs. Like top rares are going to go like straight here and then straight to zero. This card disappears after 3 picks. 50% of it is gone. After 5 picks, you only have 10% left in the pack. So this kind of a card, if you see it pick 5, you know that this is at least an atypical situation. And then it's time for you to make the judgment. Is this an atypical situation because the color is open, or is it an atypical situation because the pack was atypically strong? And because the pack was atypically strong, there are still good cards in it at pick 5 because there were much better cards at picks 1, 2, 3, and 4. And this is the whole problem with signals, that you can't know that when you start analyzing. And there are some cards in between those two scenarios that will be sort of average. So at the same time, I did this kind of analysis, and I defined for that particular analysis. I'm changing my methods here and there because I want to figure out what is the best way. And today I'm going to be doing different method, but then I did a different method. At that stage, I arbitrarily set up that I think a card that is 30% likely to be seen at a given spot will be counted as a signal. So what I mean, if we would be taking a card number, the good card, around pick 4, it's seen below 30% of what was opened in the pack. So 70% of it disappears by pick 4. So if I see that card on pick 4, that would be a signal for me in that analysis. If it was on pick 3 where it was 50%, that's not a signal because it has to be 30%, below 30%. And then what I did is I looked at a pick number for the first pack, and I say, okay, if I've seen one signal card by pick 2 or 0 cards, how many of the signals will be seen in the future? So if I saw 0 signals, I would have 100% of the average signals, which is 13.6. That's the average of the signals I will see during the draft. And if I saw 1 signal, I will have 100.02 signals, which means that it's not really anything that is useful for us as information. But the more you increase the number of signals that you've seen so far, so if by pick 12 you see 8 signals, it means that in the later stage of that particular draft, you're going to see 130% of the average numbers of signals for that particular part. So if at pack 1, pick 11, you are predicted to see around 11 signals in the future picks, then if you've seen 8 so far, that's not going to be 11 that you're going to see in the future, but 130% of 11. So probably around 14, 15 signals in the future. So the difference between 11 and 14, 15 signals in the future, which means that also by having already 8 signal cards seen, you will see a total of 8, 14, 22, 23 signals in a draft, when the average number is way below because it's probably like 11 plus 3. So that's 14. So big difference in terms of what you see based on how many you've seen so far. And this trend continues across the draft. Now, obviously, there's diminishing returns because, yes, if you've seen 12 signals by the 20th pick of the draft, you will see 50% more of the signals in the future. but you only have predicted to see 9 in the future, so you only will see 4.5 cards more on average in the future. Important if you've seen 0 signals, and this is, by the way, this is just for Demir deck in that particular set. So how many cards in Demir as a signal you will see per draft. And Demir was a strong archetype in Lord of the Rings. But if you like, here you will have a predicted 5 signals to see in the last pack. So if you see 50% more than 5 signals, that's only 2.5 cards. That's a very little gain that you're going to get. But you see more of that nonetheless. But the later, the less important the signals are. So I guess that the biggest capacity for the signals is something like end of pack 1 and maybe the first couple of picks of pack 2, where you actually will see a lot of cards still, and those strong signal mean something. But one thing that comes out from this analysis, and that's, I think, the most important part of it, is that one card doesn't change much. Seeing one card is not a signal, really. Signals are only meaningful in bulk. It's seeing multiple cards that are atypical for a color combination. This is what tells you that, okay, this is open. And even those numbers, even with all the calculations I had to do for them, we still don't know whether these signals are there because the color is open or because the pod is weak. And I think that this is the strong issue that I have with reading signals. It just doesn't tell us that thing. And here, just to show you a different visualization, we see how many signals have you seen at pack 1, pick 11, and how many signals you are likely to see past that pack 1, pack 11 in Demir in Lord of the Rings. And I think the important thing in here is that when you see this gradient of colors that I used to colorize this bar, it's diagonal. And that means that the more signals I've seen, the more signals I will see. So there is a correlation, positive correlation between how many signals I've seen so far and how many signals I will see in the future. So seeing signals will cause you to see more signals in the future, basically. The reason for that, still you can't get it from that particular data, okay? And that's the recap of the analysis I did the last time. But pick 2 is very different in terms of the draft specifics. We only have 4 players sitting at the table, and smaller pod means stronger signals, especially that one person picks 2 cards, which means that they give you double information with every past pack compared to what happens normally. And that, I think, increases the probability of reading that signal. I had many drafts in that format where I just picked a blue and black card. I get past my first pack and I'm, no blue, no black. There should be some, so someone picked them. And then I have a choice of speculating for weaker blue-black cards or maybe picking something white-green and seeing if that lane is open. But also it means that because the signals are stronger, maybe the data can be more informative than in the previous analysis, and maybe you can pinpoint the reason for certain cards to be good signals or not. And because you are also taking 2 cards, there is at least a theoretical possibility that sending signals is much more useful in this set than it was in the previous one. And again, unfortunately, reading of information depends on the reader. And you don't know who the reader is next to you because it's just some random person from Arena most of the time. So you have to sort of try to hope that they can read it. Okay, so parameters of the signal in pick 2 draft are also very different. So when you have pick 1, pick 2, so yeah, range stays the same because you only get information about one person, but relatively it's actually more information because that one person is not 1/7 of your opponents in the pod, it's 1/3 of the pod of your opponents in the pod. So you know about bigger fraction of the draft pod than you did in an 8-player draft. Also, signal is stronger because 2 cards are being depleted, and if they're done in a cohesive way, that means that that signal can be stronger because there are 2 linked cards picked from that pack. A lot of the time, not always, but sometime at least. Which hopefully makes reading of the signal easier because you get the pack and you see, oh, there's just no Demir cards. I guess that the person next to me is on Demir. And then, of course, you need to decide if you want to fight over Demir with that person or not. And if you decide not, then you probably should avoid Demir and let them have it. And hopefully, if you let them have it, you're going to get rewarded by them passing something else to you. But also, I think it means that reading signals can happen faster and is easier in the pick 2 draft, and also potentially it is more impactful. Now, we had an example of a set that was not a particularly successful one and that had 2 colors that were not working very well, and I think that this is a problem of Omen Paths, not of the pick 2 draft. But I do think that if we are getting a balanced pick 2 draft, it's going to be a very fun experience to draft. And I think it's going to be the more fun, the less advanced you are in drafting. I think like super seasoned players, like veterans, are going to enjoy it a bit less. But a lot of people are just afraid to draft. And I think that the pick 2 draft maybe is the sort of like stabilizer wheels on the bike for the people who want to get into draft. You'd rather start with a pick 2 small set draft than to dive in straight to Vintage Cube and get obliterated by people who have been playing that for 20 years. Okay, then we have pick 1, pack 4. And now we have a full table covered with only 6 cards missing from the pack. And this is less than in the normal draft. In the normal draft, when you see the card that was opened by your neighbor to the other side, you have 7 cards depleted from the pack. So I think that it has smaller card pool depleted, which potentially can amplify the signals too, because if there are more cards in the pack, there's a better chance that there's something powerful because the pack is stacked or something. So fewer cards were gone, and in the normal draft, there's 7 gone, and those 7 are picked by 7 different people. So they sent 7 different signals. While this one, you only see 3 people that sent you the signal. So you have it very, very targeted. And again, the weakest of those signals is from this person here. And the strongest is from this person that was passing the cards directly to you because, well, they've seen the poorest versions of those packs, while this person was picking like a rare. And also this person went through 3 packs to passing through you, and this only 1 so far. Oh, actually 0 so far. And then we have the pack 1, pick 5. So wheel has 8 cards missing. This is just like normal draft. That's fine. And this is the moment to look at what wheeled to you, and are those the cards that you were hoping to wheel or not? So as I said, there are signals that are confounding. There are confounding factors that make signal analysis problematic. First of all, every pod will have a random level of card power opened. Some pods are going to have stronger cards opened. Some pods will have weaker cards opened. And there's nothing you can do about it. And it's very hard to know also. But it's there. You can't not acknowledge its existence if it's there. Second of all, the distribution of the cards that were opened. Sometimes all the good cards will be at the one end of the table and all the rubbish on the other side of the table. So that is something that will impact signal reading. Because if you're sitting at the opening poor packs end of the table, and the packs arrive to you from the, oh, we opened amazingly strong packs side of the table, you might interpret them as signals rather than just by variance in power level inside of the booster pack. Okay, another thing that will confound signals is player skill in the pod. It's not even that there's, I think, like a hard rule on that, but beginner players tend to be a bit more chaotic in draft, and also maybe have non-optimal card evaluation skills yet. And because of that, they might send those cards that you think are signals, but are not signals of what's open, just they're signals of the fact that the opponent on one of your sides is a beginner and still learning limited, and therefore is sending random signals. And also player draft consistency in the pod. So did people first pick something and happily continued picking cards for that same thing forever? Or are people bobbing and weaving and try to find their lane and pick some white cards and some black and some red and some green and some blue, end up with this pile kind of deck? But it makes also reading signals much more difficult for you, because you don't know if what you're reading is a signal or just an artifact of people weaving between colors and not being able to decide. Okay, and this is where we got on how to measure those things. So I looked at cards with game in hand win rate over 56%. And I looked at how many of them were seen between pack 1, pick 1 and pack 1, pick 4. And remember, they are double picks, so we're talking about the first 8 cards of the draft. So I'm looking at how many of those were picked, how many of those were passed, how many of those were seen later during the draft. Yeah, and then I tried to analyze different metrics. And the first metric was cards seen so far to cards that will be seen in the future. So I look at this first 8 picks that you do, so first 4 picks of double picking the cards, and is seeing more good cards in each color combination leading to seeing more of them in the future as well. And definitely you do. So the column here is how many good cards were seen in pack 1 and pack 1 pick 1 to pack 1 pick 4. And as you can see, especially for the good colors, the blue white and white green, there is an increase. The more you see, the more you will see in the future. So here you saw 10 good white blue cards, and you're predicted to see 22 more. You see 2 good white blue cards, and you're only predicted to see 18.5 more in the future. So there's a clear link between how many good cards you've seen for the particular color combination and how many good cards you will see. And this works specifically good for the good color combinations, like white blue and blue green and white green were those color combinations in this particular set. But if you look at black red, which was not a great color, this effect is not much. It's not very much pronounced. You see 0 good black red cards, you will see 4.7 of them in the future. You've saw 7 good black red cards, you will see 6.6 in the future. So the difference is not even 2. But it's still not nothing, because you already have 7 extra cards that you have potentially picked in this draft. It's just that this shows you that black red is a tricky deck to if you picked 7, or if you picked 7 good black red cards, adding 6 on top of that, that's a big boost versus 0 and 4.7. But again, this is a bit probabilistic. You won't get a guarantee that if you've seen a lot of good black red cards, they are going to be seen later, because it sort of depends on what is open, because there's so few of those cards. And that's why the dynamic between seeing 0 and 7 is not particularly sharp. But here we have large deviations of how many good blue white cards you can see in those first 4 picks, also 8 picks. And here we're going between 17.4 good cards in the future versus 23 good cards in the future. So a whole 7 picks extra you get if you've seen already a ton of good cards in that color. Part of it is because they are wheeling as well at a certain stage. So the other metric is picked cards to what you will see in the future. Because it's one thing to see a good card, but seeing doesn't mean that you pick those. So I also looked at the ratio of the sort of like cards picked to how many cards you will see in the future. And this is sort of, I guess, a measure of does picking the cards impact future signals? So the fact that I'm picking something strong, does it literally send the signal, or is my opponent still drafting white because they just don't know any better and they can't be arsed? And importantly, does it like differ by color pair? Because as you can see, some of those color pairs, they just don't see good cards ever. And because of that, probably they are never forced. While white, blue, and white, green, they definitely improve the more cards you see. So it's very important for the deck to see as many banging cards in the games. And I think here, yeah, this is another interesting aspect that does the meta preference have any play in that? Because people might prioritize a certain type of card because they want to be in a particular color combination. Okay, so when we look at how many cards were picked, obviously maximum that of the cards that are good in the archetype that could have been picked is 8. Only white-green had a large enough sample size to calculate that 8. But if you picked all 8 cards that are good for white-green in the white-green deck in the first 4 picks of the draft, you will see 26 good white-green cards in the future. If you picked 0, you will only see 21. This is a sizable difference for that. Just picking cards does increase the odds of seeing more cards. So this tells me a couple of things. One thing is that it is not 100% foolproof strategy, but there definitely is something into sending signals by eliminating a certain color. If a person picks all the cards in the early draft from a particular color and the player to their left will realize it, well, there's a good chance that they will move off of that color because they will feel like they're outcompeted from it or something. Now, honestly, probably not the best example for this particular set, because this particular set, well, it's small and only 4 people play against each other. So you can't find certain types of tags and make sure that they work against you. Okay, and the last metric I want to introduce is cards that were passed to what you will see in the future. This is strictly about sending the signals. I'm passing those good cards. Will it impact how many good cards I will see in the future? And does it differ by color pairs like the other statistics did? The range between picking 0 white grid cards and picking 8 of them is not that large considering the size of the number of the cards that you see. But if you look at black-red, there's basically almost no impact of signal sending on how much you will see in the future, which is unsurprising. There's just not enough good red-blue cards, and that probably makes it suffer. So in terms of the past cards, we see a very similar pattern to the previous graphs. White, blue, and white, green, they basically have a much steeper gradient on seeing cards converting to wins, to future, passing cards contributing to the amount of good cards that you're going to see in the future. But it's still a very small effect. If you see 0 good white-green cards, you will still see 21 of them in the future of your draft. If you've seen 15 good white-green cards in that turn, you will get 25 good cards still in the future. So that's all after the wheel on the first pack. It's not nothing, but it's not like amazing a reward. You just get like 6 extra decent card to your deck if the color was crazy open, and by crazy open, you've seen good cards in that particular color. Anyway, the conclusions of that are that passing, seeing, picking cards does not have as much effect as you think. And we can see that from this one. Literally, passing good white-green cards make you see more of the good white-green cards in the future. Again, part of that effect is from the fact that the cards that you passed are coming back to you because they wheeled. But a large part of it must be that just when you see a lot of that color open, it's just open and that's it. And you can pass, but no one is interested in what you're passing, and those things wheel to you and come back to you. So I think that this is the issue that we're running into. Because think about it, the fact that the more cards you in a given color you pass to your neighbors, the more of them you will get in a draft. It sort of indicates that sending the signal that you picked all the black cards, or you passed all the black cards, or white green cards, doesn't do that much to an average arena opponent, unfortunately. So there definitely are confounding factors still in this analysis. And I'm pretty sure that, like, I'm just telling you that sending, seeing, passing signals does not have as much of an effect as you might think. But there are definitely drafts where signals work, and there are definitely drafts where signals don't work. And I think that more important than reading signal is to try to analyze which draft am I in. Am I seeing this busted white uncommon because no one in the pod is drafting white? Or am I drafting this busted white uncommon because people don't realize that the card is good and they pick a mediocre white uncommon or common in that stand? So you have to think about those kind of things. And am I reading signals, or am I just interpreting the noise as a signal? And I think it's a very tricky part, but at least if you start conceptualizing that in this way, you can instantly improve navigating pods when you just start thinking on the lines of, does my opponent play like this because it's suboptimal, or is it actually optimal and they have the nuts? And that's one of the things that you can figure out. Thinking about things is my least favorite part of Magic, says Sizey Man, to which I call poppycock. I know you, and I know that you like thinking about things in Magic. It sometimes happens that you think about things in Magic after you've done the thing, and that's the problem. But you will still think about them. It's just that your actions are sometimes faster than your brain's processing power, and yet very decisive in happening. So I call poppycock on the thinking being your least favorite part of Magic. Okay, that was the sort of like an part on how do the signals look like, how strong are they. But I also wanted to look at the impact of a passed signal. So passing solid cards will definitely have some impact. You pass a good uncommon and someone eventually will take it. If they don't, that's a super strong signal if you manage to table a very powerful uncommon all around the table. But as I said a couple of times already today, I think it's very overvalued by players, the impact of passing a signal. It's people don't care that much. People open their pack, they pick their rare, and 80% of the time that rare goes into their deck. And if it's not in the color that you're drafting, well, there's a good chance that they won't be interested in the card that you're passing. If they don't know that the card is good because they don't have the evaluation skills, again, they might completely ignore the signal that you passed. But I thought, let's look at the impact of picking and passing together at the same graph. So here I have a graph like how many good cards were picked in a particular draft and how many good cards were passed in a particular draft. And It's another of those diagonal gradients, which means that both things are important for the final value. So the more cards you pick, but also the more cards you pass, the more you will see later. And this to me indicates one thing, that a lot of what's happening on Arena is not determined really by reading signals or anything. It's determined by such a trivial thing as the strength of the pod and the strength of the card evaluation within the pod. And I think that in Arena circumstances, this might be a more important factor than reading signals. And this is something that we don't have control over. We're just going to be paired into a pod that you will play, and that's about it. So I'm afraid I don't have very good news for you, but luck of the draw in what pod you're going to be assigned to is going to be pretty important. But uh, because the thing is diagonal, it means that each of those aspects individually is also important. If you pass a lot of good cards, you will see a lot of good cards later. Again, partially because they will wheel. You will have those deep packs that have so many good cards that even after the whole table picks it, there's still a couple of left for you. And the more good cards you pick, the more good cards you will see in the future is also true. As you see, like if you pick the zero good cards in this particular circumstance, and then 6 good cards picked in this circumstance, you will see an increase of how many good cards you will see later in that draft. So both of those things have an aspect, and there's definitely a role of pack lottery and pod lottery in there. But there is also, like, if you pick good cards, you will also see good cards kind of situation. Okay, so this one was for white green, and these are for the other colors. So as you can see, it is a universal trend that you get this kind of diagonal gradient there, independently of what color we do, even in black red. But this just to show you that it's a generic trend rather than something specific to white green in Omen Path set. So yeah, generally the more you pick, but also the more you pass, the more you will see in the future. Picking is the easy part. Lane is open, you're picking good card. But I struggled a bit with explaining why passing things impacts how many you see. In the end, I came up with the conclusion that this must be an effect of wheeling those things that you pass, especially when you open like strong cards and on the first pick, and then you pass it and it comes back to you still with something good in it. But I think that the most important thing in there is that the effect is not that good. It's not that huge. You will find like small edges here and there, but it's not massive. There is a difference between getting 20 good cards in your draft from the particular color combination and getting 25, but it's not like a mind-blowing effect. It's an effect, and it's there, and I'd rather have 25 good cards in my deck than to have 20, because that 20 means I will have to put bad cards in my deck, while 25 means I can cut a good card from my deck, and this is the difference. So I guess that yeah, that's the take-home message. Make sure you make the playables, read signals, but don't really put too much stock on them. So as I said, some pods will be stronger and some pods will be weaker based on the cards open and players in the pod. And I looked at whether it impacts the win rate that you have. And I quantified the total amount of signals that were seen during the draft. It's not like a perfect math there, because some cards that I was evaluating are both good in blue green and sort of white green and white blue, so they will count sort of double in that. But when I looked at how many signals were seen and the win rate, you see a very clear and significant positive trend. So the more signals you've seen, the higher your win rate is going to be. And this indicates to me that the weaker the pod in terms of card evaluation, the better the chance for you to trophy. But if you end up with a pod that is highly competitive, and you don't see any strong signals, your win rate also suffers for that. And it might be a reason for not seeing those strong cards because they're just not open and just like bad luck in what was in the packs. But it also might be that you are playing a very strong pod with very strong players. And I think that this is one of the reasons why a lot of the pro players are wary of using data, because they will play in a situation that is closer to this than to this, while on Arena, quite often you play here. And they think that data obtained from pods like this is not particularly useful in pods that are more like this. I don't think that there's definitely, it's not that this is a baseless accusation, but I do think that data converges between skill levels, player levels, rank levels quite well and quite linearly. So I would say that if something is good or mediocre in on Arena, it's going to be 95%, 98% of the time also mediocre / bad in the paper field, even if the paper field has some extremely strong players that are very consistent with how they're drafting, and they're never passing strong signal cards because they will pick them and identify them because their pick orders are immaculate. Okay, and I think that the last thing that I wanted to do is this visualization of how many futures, so how many signals seen determine how many future signals are there. And here we don't see this diagonal kind of thing. We see a blob. And this blob that tells me that's normal distribution. And if it's normal distribution, it means that that's how you can describe how many signals were seen to how many signals are there in the future. You can think of it that it will be determined by something that can be described by a bell curve. And if it can be described by something that can be described by a bell curve, it is likely to do with pack collation. Player skills level are not normally distributed. There is going to be disproportionately more weaker player than super strong players. These are going to be rare. So I doubt that the ability of the players is going to be perfectly normally distributed. I think it's going to be slightly skewed. And I don't see that in this graph, which makes me think that pack collation and what is actually open in the pod is also maybe an underappreciated aspect. And we attribute reading signals to what is just we open good packs in that pod. Okay. Now, what is it about acting on the signals? So here I looked at the first 4 picks in pick 2 draft, only looking at the drafts where there were 8 or more white-green signal cards in the pack. And if the player picked 0 to 4 of those good cards in the first 4 picks, win rate was around 53, 54%. But if they picked 6, 7, 8, that win rate goes to 60, 65 even percent. So this is where drafting with preferences comes in. You can only draft 8 good cards for Selesnya if you're ready to draft Selesnya at the beginning of the draft. You pick a white and a green card, and the draft comes together, and then you just continue with it, and you pick all of those cards. It means that if you read the signals while drafting the deck already, and you knew that you should stick with it, and you get rewarded with those good cards, it's going to be an amazing situation for you. But if you see those signals in white-green, but you pass them, you are reverting to below average win rates. So it's important to be ready to draft those good color combinations, especially in sets with the lopsided win rates between different color combinations. And here we also see the win rate, link between win rate and number of cards that were picked and number of cards that were seen. And Unlike with the other graphs where we've seen this diagonal kind of gradient, here we see not a diagonal gradient, but it sort of goes from left to right. And it means that the more white-green cards that are good that were picked, the higher the win rate of your draft. So here we're looking at the win rate of the draft versus cards that were seen and cards that were picked. Cards that were seen don't seem to be an extremely important factor. There might be some small effect of that, but it's small, if any. I would say if you looked at the stats of those numbers, you probably come up with this. There is no kind of increasing trend in between how many cards were seen and the win rate. But there's a strong link between how many white-green cards were picked and the win rate of your draft. So don't miss a strong lane if you are presented with it. This is where the preference comes in. If you know that white-green is strong, picking a couple of white-green cards early is actually a decent idea, because if you get hooked up, you're in for an amazing draft and a very good result. If not, you have ample amount of time to pivot into something else. So it's good to start optimistically on something strong. Now, of course, the problem with me giving that advice is that if everyone took it, drafts would turn into complete chaos, because like all the players would pick white-green cards in their first pick, and then all of a sudden they would realize that it's cut because everyone in the pod is picking white-green. They would all shift to Demir, realize that they're all in Demir, and then God knows what would happen after that. So that might lead to the slightly weird table dynamics. But luckily, my following is relatively slow, and you're here. So if you know that and you apply that, then you can actually gain some edges and put yourselves in a positions where wins are happening naturally. Okay. So the conclusion from those analyses is that signals are only as important as our reaction to them. Seeing signals doesn't mean much if you don't act on them and start picking the cards. It also means that in unbalanced sets, preferential drafting will be something that you should be doing. Put yourself in a position to react rapidly to the signals. And the best position to react rapidly to signals is to start drafting the best color combination. And then be ready to move to something else. Again, with the caveat that if everyone followed that strategy, we would be doomed, and all drafts would end in an incoherent mess. And secondly, poor color signals are meaningless. It really doesn't matter if you see a signal for Rakdos in the Omen Path set, because even if you see it, if you see a lot of even black-red signals, it just doesn't tell you anything about the future, because it's stochastic what happens later. It just depends only exclusively of which good red-black cards are opened in the pack, because there's so few of them that it will be sort of like stochastic, while the strong colors like white-green in this set, you will see a much stronger effect of seeing the signals and how many signals will be seen in the future. So this is, I think, important, that the stronger the color, the stronger the signal. Okay, and that's it. That's it for me for today. Hopefully you enjoyed a bit of stories from Liverpool, a bit of stories about reading the signals and how maybe it's not as important as you might think. And important to next week, we're back with the skeleton crew. I still don't know who the skeletons are, but I think Samp is lined up, maybe Trezio. So we're going to be talking about the Avatar set and putting that show on the road. So that's going to be exciting. But until then, I'll see you next week. Bye.